So if you happen to open up twitter.com anytime in the last 12 hours, you may have looked around and went, what the hell just happened? I don't got time for this shit. I'm out. And to be honest, it makes sense. And I don't think anyone's gonna blame you for not wanting to sit through more than 10 minutes of a video where not the most generous and good faith arguments are being presented off the rip.
There's a quote that goes, "The greater the crime perpetrated by the leadership, the less likely the people will ever believe their leader's capable of perpetrating such an event." That is unfortunately a Hitler quote, but it's one that's very applicable to the current situation.
However, I did end up watching the entire video, and I must say, Hacks makes a very, very, very well-rounded and compelling argument that Leffen has been manipulating the community and has permeated to the point of being so prevalent that we almost just recognize it as normal and dismiss any kind of criticism of this culture.
Because when someone with a massively high follower account decides to block everybody who dissents from them, what it does is it divides their community into those who conform and those who don't. And this creates massive illegitimate pressure to conform, which can then be exploited because it creates the illusion of trustworthiness and correctness. And in this era of social media that we're now living in, I actually advise for this strategy to be forbidden when you consider how dangerous it can potentially be.
Now, there were plenty of flaws, and there were plenty of great, profound, deep moments in this 2.5-hour journey. And my goal today is to summarize, break down, analyze, and expand on each of those kind of points that I really felt like stood out and was worth discussing. However, I do want to say I do recommend that you at least watch some extent of the actual video itself. I would say if nothing else, the conclusion alone is a really well tied up thesis statement that will give you the general idea that Hacks is talking about and will probably make you want to go watch the rest of the video yourself.
So let's talk about why no matter where you are on the social ladder or what your role is within this community, you should be very concerned with the status quo. Your concern should be what I call the hit list. The reason I know about the hit list is because I was the first one who had the misfortune of being added to it. Now, over time, I watched the hit list expand. I saw other people join the hit list, and they joined a hit list without knowing that they had joined one. People like Hungrybox and Zero probably didn't even realize that they were a part of a repeating trend. And when you look at who is getting added to this hit list, it actually becomes clear as day what's going on.
With all that being said, here's my opinions and my thoughts on Evidence.Zip 2.0. At first, I would like to start off this segment by just saying that I do not approve of Hack's decision to use Leffen in the same light as any totalitarian leader, especially before you've even started the argument in the first place. The value of using a Hitler quote and starting his argument with the furthest reach and toughest possible pill to swallow was admittedly bold, but counterproductive and irresponsible in reality. With that being said, I do urge you to push yourself to view the information presented by Hacks with an open mind still, despite this bad judgment call, and not dismiss everything you hear from him right away. And to the Ultimate community especially, we need to show in actions moving forward that we don't immediately dismiss strong claims from a member of the community who's always had a strong and respected voice. Top player worship is taken to a different level in Melee. They are the gods. But who's the real hero of the story of the gods? It's become the God Slayer himself. A guy who can talk his shit and back it up, never afraid to take a challenge, and maybe the subject of some entertaining beef and occasional rage moments here and there. But the thing we need to remember is that you don't always know a person just because you follow them on Twitter. And a lot of the time, people who fall victim to only being able to judge people from the character that they play. But how much do we really get to see? Have you ever seen Leffen from Hungrybox's eyes before?
People still seem to think that the Leffen H-Box beef was just some run-of-the-mill beef, but there was so much more to it than that. The Leffen H-Box beef was a calculated attempt to end H-Box's career that took place right in front of everybody's eyes. It would also cause extreme damage to the community, as Leffen's cons usually do. I was able to recognize that all of this would happen from the start, having been on Leffen's hit list for years. The problem was that nobody else did. As for the Leffen H-Box beef, what happened here was Leffen decided that if he couldn't beat H-Box, then a viable way to dispose of him was to destroy his reputation and push him out of the community. Most people would never consider such an immoral strategy, but the Machiavellian viewpoint is different. The second reason was envy. Just as Leffen never liked me because of the fact that I had respected melee opinions, he couldn't stand the fact that HBox was in his way. And lastly, the third reason was blackmail. Leffen had been blackmailing people ever since the days of Evidence.Zip, and we all saw how he blackmailed me during the box legality process. In this case, Leffen's blackmail was the little-known fact that HBox had cheated on his girlfriend. Everyone would find out about this a few years later, but at the time, not too many people knew about it, and we can assume HBox would have preferred to keep things that way. A month later, Leffen released propaganda in the form of a video called One of the Many Reasons to Dislike HBox. The video depicted HBox as the devil and received about 400,000 views. Unfortunately, not nearly enough people realized how malicious this video was. As 2018 went on, Leffen continued to do things like censor HBox's name in his Twitch chat and misrepresent their in-person interactions. When Leffen claimed that HBox begged him to be unblocked on Twitter, for example, I happen to know that HBox politely asked Leffen to settle their beef. Leffen then went and rephrased this in the most vindictive way possible.
And tell me about the set history between these two, Scar.
So Leffen versus HBox has actually been, they have had a long rivalry, and it's gotten a bit personal at times.
These
guys do not like each other. They don't,
Leffen,
kind of oil and water a little bit.
Leffen frequently tweets about, such and such, like, I can't believe this terrible human being. He doesn't say terrible, player. He says terrible human being.
Yeah, it's gotten to that level.
It's gotten to that level. Is killing the game that I love. Leffen's maybe a little bit melodramatic about it, but
maybe a little, but that's what we like about him.
The false narrative that HBox's deplorable person eventually made its way to commentary slots and news outlets such as ESPN. You can tell from the way Scar and Toph spoke about Leffen that inciting mass hatred was a part of his brand at this point, and that the community would condone it too.
See, often we say that life is all about the evolution, learning, growing, and taking accountability for your actions. When people have issues, but actively engage in those acts, we tend to lend them the benefit of the doubt a little easier when we know that they are trying to be better. But sometimes, the shield of an ego can be so strong that we get stuck in the same negativity loops for years and years, constantly throwing ourselves into confrontation and conflict, not always aware of how it might be impacting others more so than just ourselves.
You're absolutely not supposed to say what I'm about to tell you, but Salem was conned by Leffen. I discussed this with Mutaking last year, and he agreed. The problem was that Salem went on to say things about the Melee community that couldn't be defended, as M2K put it. M2K and I agreed that Salem was just a nerd who'd been bullied, and said things they probably didn't mean. They became part of Leffen's political agenda when Leffen started harassing them about their opinions on Ultimate with the intention of vilifying someone. None of the arguments Leffen made about Snake being a bad character would end up being correct, but that wasn't the point. Leffen needed to trigger someone quickly, and he would end up doing just that. After Salem posted years of research, they ended up losing their entire reputation over the course of 2 days. While his beef with Salem was to milk the Ultimate community of its resources, Salem actually referenced this in years of research when they said that there were people who were only interested in profiting off of Ultimate. Salem also pointed out that Leffen's fan base grows alongside his malicious intent, which is completely accurate. Years of research had all sorts of other problems though, so these things got overlooked. A few months later, Salem lost their sponsor, and Leffen was there to celebrate. By that point, everyone had forgotten that Leffen instigated this beef in the first place, which just goes to show how effective it is to unite people against a common enemy. When Leffen beat Salem half a year later at Super Smash Con, a sea of onlookers watched in awe as the supervillain of Ultimate was defeated. But what they didn't realize was that the real villain had just won.
Throughout the duration of Hax's video, he points to many examples that tend to show Leffen's proclivity towards creating a toxic environment in the Smash community for his personal gain. Now, do I happen to buy into the idea that Leffen is doing this out of a conscious decision to want to become the totalitarian dictator of the Smash community? I could see that being a bit of a reach. I do believe, however, that Hax does a really good job of showing how toxic energy can persist inside of a community for many years and begin to rot it from its core to the outside. We need to hear more from Leffen in regard to these serious claims, and I think people are way too quick to overlook the info in this video. Due to my personal life experience with ego, narcissism, and Machiavellism, I think Leffen is unconsciously being controlled by his dark triad traits similar to the case of Samsora. Hypocrisy, snake-like behavior, and turning your back on others with little remorse is a common trait of a guilty conscience clashing with a very powerful ego.
The reason Leffen made his twit longer in the first place was because people didn't initially believe Jisoo's allegations. On July 2nd at 8:10 p.m. EST, Jisoo alleged that Zero had shown her hentai when she was 15, but people didn't believe her at first because she didn't provide any evidence. This led to Leffen stepping in the next morning at 5:01 a.m. EST. Leffen's Twitlonger was intended to turn the tide back in Jisoo's favor, but it was riddled with so much manipulative language that I knew Leffen had a vested interest in canceling Zero the moment I read it. I also knew that Zero would end up getting cancelled as soon as I read Leffen's Twitlonger, simply due to how these situations always play out whenever Leffen's involved. Leffen's Twitlonger begins and ends by clarifying that Leffen would like to remain friends with Zero after this is all said and done, and that he simply wants the best for his friend. These statements are blatantly insincere, especially when you consider where they're placed. Leffen even clarifies in the first statement that he hasn't spent much time with Zero, and so him claiming that Zero is his friend doesn't make any sense. From there, Leffen makes 4 more statements that either clarify or imply that what Zero did isn't that bad, and that nobody is trying to cancel Zero. Of all the times we've seen Leffen project, this is probably the easiest one to see through. Yet another issue with Leffen's Twitlonger is his constant use of the word nuanced. He uses this word a total of 5 times, which is not only excessive, but also strange when you consider that Jisoo's allegations weren't nuanced at all. Leffen even apologizes in the final paragraph by saying, "I'm sorry this has been a lot of words without any clear conclusions." All in all, most of Leffen's Twitlonger doesn't actually tell you anything, and reads as though it was written by someone who was on drugs. There's only one part of Leffen's Twitlonger that actually matters, and it's a testimony he gives toward the end. Leffen's testimony talks about how he allegedly witnessed Zero sharing hentai with 1 or 2 Japanese smashers in a hotel room at Apex 2013. According to Leffen, this made it more likely that Jisoo's testimony was truthful. There's a problem with Leffen's testimony that I want to highlight. At the time of Apex 2013, Zero was 17 years old. This means that Zero was legally a minor, and so if any of the Japanese players were 18 or older, they'd have been guilty of the same crime Zero would later commit against Jisoo. Zero would end up confirming that the Japanese players in question were in fact older than him. If Zero was a minor at Apex 2013, then why didn't Leffen bother to open a case against the Japanese players who were in the hotel room? Furthermore, why did Leffen phrase his testimony as though Zero was the guilty party in this situation? According to Leffen, Zero is to be blamed regardless of whether he's the minor or not. This is a major loophole in Leffen's logic that no one caught. Leffen didn't need half a year to pivot toward his true intentions this time around. Just 17 minutes after Leffen posted his Twitlonger, he was already tweeting in a way that suggested that Zero was a criminal who ought to be cancelled. This would have been perfectly fine if not for the fact that Leffen had just assured us that he wasn't trying to cancel Zero. There was no emotional consistency among anything Leffen was saying or doing. One last thing I want to show you is that Leffen would have gladly used Me Too to take out HBox as well. When rumors of HBox allegations began to spread, Leffen quickly implemented chat commands in preparation for them. He wanted to leverage Me Too as hard as possible by not only taking the helm, but also by taking out both of the people whose social media followings rivaled his. All in all, Leffen's actions during the Me Too movement reveal what a snake he really is, and should leave no doubt as to his intentions.
It's important to discuss these topics so that the current and future community members don't have to suffer the same blissful ignorance that has led us to this point today. I believe it likely at this point that Leffen's past experiences, intelligence, and his competitive drive have created an ego mask so strong that he can't help but contradict his potentially well-intentioned beliefs with nefarious and selfish actions. I, however, am not willing to take the leap to quote-unquote full-blown psychopath, and it does slightly hurt Hax's objectivity to paint such a dramatic and bad faith premise from the start. I do believe his totalitarianism angle is developed on well in his conclusion, but somewhere inside of a genius expose on somebody obsessed with themselves, the truth is, a lot of times when it comes to dark triads, it takes one to know one. I may receive backlash for this video, but I do believe it is necessary to take this matter seriously and continue to work together to build a better, more productive, and healthy community for the well-being of us all. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I don't want to see anyone canceled or taken down. I just personally am tired of seeing talented and smart people turn into the anime villain due to their own insecurities. If you feel you struggle with anything talked about today, you should definitely consider a therapy treatment plan and working towards taking back control of your own actions. I promise you, it is worth it. Goodbye.